Have you ever wondered if something as private, and let's be honest, as rarely discussed as masturbation could actually be affecting your health as you age? I mean, let's face it, this isn't something we grew up talking about. And as the years go on, many men find themselves asking, is this still normal? Is it healthy? Should I be worried? Or maybe you've never talked about it at all. But here's the surprising truth. What you do in private may be having a bigger impact on your prostate, your sleep, your energy, and even your heart than you ever realized. And chances are, nobody ever gave you the full story. That's exactly why I'm opening up this conversation today. Hi, I'm Dr. John. I've spent over 30 years helping seniors across America navigate aging with confidence, grace, and dignity. And one thing I've learned: some of the most important health conversations are the ones we've been too shy or too ashamed to have. In this video, I'm going to share some surprising science heartfelt life lessons from older men and simple practical advice that might just change how you look at your body and your well-being. And hey, if you find this helpful, feel free to subscribe to Senior Health Secrets. We're not afraid to talk about the things that matter. Let's dive in. Now, before we dive into the details, let's take a moment to acknowledge something important. If you're a man in your 60s, 70s, or beyond, you've seen a lot in life. You've worked hard, loved deeply, overcome challenges, and maybe even lost people you cared about. Through all that, your body has changed, and so has your relationship with it. And yet, there's one area we almost never talk about: how aging affects our sexuality, especially when it comes to masturbation. I've spoken with hundreds of older men, some married, some widowed, some long retired, and many have asked me quietly, almost apologetically, is it still okay to do this? Does it mean something's wrong with me? Am I the only one still doing this at my age? Let me assure you, you're not the only one. Far from it. But here's the issue: we've spent decades in a culture that shames open conversations about sexuality, especially for seniors. And that silence, it creates confusion, guilt, even anxiety, when in truth, this can be a healthy, normal, even healing part of your life. Today, we're going to take the confusion out of it. You'll learn what's actually going on in your body, what's healthy, what to be cautious about, and what other men your age have learned, looking back on their lives. And I promise there's no judgment here, just real talk rooted in science, experience, and compassion. Let's start with the foundation: what actually happens to a man's body as he gets older, especially in relation to sexual health. First, and most importantly, you're not broken. You're aging. And aging doesn't mean the end of desire, but it does mean things start to work a little differently. Now, biologically speaking, one of the biggest changes we experience is the gradual decline in testosterone. That's the hormone responsible for libido, muscle mass, energy, and yes, sexual function. Testosterone peaks in your 20s and 30s, then slowly declines about 1% per year after age 40. By the time you're in your 60s or 70s, that can mean a significant difference. But here's where it gets misunderstood: that drop in testosterone doesn't mean you lose interest completely. It just changes how and when that interest shows up. It may take more stimulation, you might need more time, or you might find that the desire comes and goes in waves rather than being constant. Add in changes in blood flow, which are completely normal with age, and you get another piece of the puzzle. Erections may not be as firm or spontaneous as they once were, and that's nothing to be embarrassed about. It's part of the same process that causes gray hair or stiffer joints. What surprises many men, though, is the emotional shift that comes with it. Some feel frustrated, even ashamed, especially if they compare themselves to their younger years. Some start to pull away from intimacy, whether solo or with a partner, because they think, what's the point anymore? If that's been your experience, I want you to know you are not alone. And these changes do not take away your worth, your masculinity, or your right to experience pleasure and closeness. Here's an analogy I often share with my patients. Think of your body like a classic car. It might not have the raw horsepower it did in its prime, but with the right care, it can still run beautifully. In fact, some older vehicles are more appreciated, more respected because of their history, their resilience, and their uniqueness. You're the same way. Understanding what's happening biologically can remove so much of the fear and shame. When we stop blaming ourselves and start seeing the full picture, we make space for healthier, more empowering decisions. So, to recap this first part, it's normal for testosterone to decline as you age. Blood flow changes naturally affect arousal and performance. Emotional responses are just as real as the physical ones. And most importantly, you are not less of a man because of it. Now, you might be thinking, all right, doc, I get that. My body's changing. But what does that mean when it comes to something like masturbation? Is it still okay? Is it helpful or harmful? Great question. Because in the next part, we're going to explore how solo intimacy isn't just about release it, can actually support your emotional and physical health in ways you probably haven't considered. Stay with me. This next part might just change the way you think about it completely. So now that we've talked about how the body changes as we age, let's address the big question head on. Is masturbation still healthy in your 60s, 70s, or even 80s? The short answer, yes, if it's done mindfully and in balance. But what surprises many of my patients is that masturbation isn't just about physical release. In fact, especially in older age, it can serve some truly meaningful emotional and even health-related roles. Let's break this down. First, from a mental and emotional standpoint, masturbation can be a source of stress relief, emotional comfort, self-connection, even improved sleep. When we orgasm, the body releases a cocktail of feel-good chemicals, dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin. These are the same chemicals that help you feel relaxed, calm, and connected. For many older men, especially those who live alone or have lost a partner, this becomes a quiet but powerful form of self-soothing. And then there's the physical side. You might be surprised to hear this, but studies have shown that regular ejaculation can actually help maintain prostate health. There's even research suggesting that men who ejaculate more frequently, whether with a partner or alone, may have a slightly lower risk of prostate cancer. Now let's clear up some common myths, because these still float around even in this day and age. It causes blindness. Nope, not even a little. That myth goes back to the 1800s and has no basis in science. It's harmful to the heart. In fact, sexual activity, including solo, increases circulation and can even support cardiovascular function in moderation. It means you're lonely or broken. Absolutely not. Many happily married or partnered older men still masturbate. It doesn't have to be either or, it can be both. And for men who aren't in a relationship or are grieving the loss of a spouse, masturbation can be a way to stay emotionally connected to your body, to remember that you're still alive, still deserving of pleasure, still human. I once spoke with a man named Harold, 75 years old, widowed for nearly a decade. He told me for a while I felt guilty, like I was betraying my wife's memory, but eventually I realized it wasn't about forgetting her. It was about honoring my own life. I'm still here, and I still want to feel whole. That stuck with me. Now, some men worry that masturbation in later life is somehow immature or unmanly. Let me be clear, there is nothing immature about taking care of your emotional and physical health. Whether it's brushing your teeth, exercising, or expressing your sexuality, this is about self-respect, not shame. It's also worth mentioning that as we age, intimacy may become less about urgency and more about presence. Solo intimacy at this stage in life can become a mindful, almost meditative experience. It can be a quiet way to check in with your body, appreciate what still works, and release tension. And here's another benefit for some men dealing with conditions like insomnia or restlessness. Masturbation, especially before bed, can help relax the body and improve sleep. That's not just anecdotal. It's backed by research on how oxytocin and prolactin promote drowsiness and calm. But this doesn't mean there aren't things to be aware of, and we'll talk about that in the next section. Like anything, too much of a good thing can become unhelpful if it starts to take over your routine or mask deeper emotions. For now, I want you to take this message to heart. Masturbation isn't just physical. It's emotional. It's natural. It's often beneficial. And yes, it's perfectly normal at every age. If you're someone who's always felt uncomfortable with the topic, that's okay. You're not alone. We were raised in a different time. But the good news is it's never too late to learn something new and to treat yourself with kindness and understanding. Coming up next, we're going to look at the flip side. What happens when this healthy habit starts slipping into territory that's not so helpful? We'll talk about the signs to look for when it might be too much and how to get back in balance. Stick with methus is one part you don't want to skip. All right, now that we've talked about how masturbation can be healthy and even beneficial, let's talk honestly about when it might cross a line. Like most things in life, eating, drinking, even watching TV, balance is key. Masturbation in and of itself isn't harmful, but when it starts interfering with your physical health, mental well-being, or your relationships, that's when it deserves a closer look. So how can you tell if it's become too much? Let's look at a few clear warning signs I've seen over the years in my practice. The first red flag is compulsivity. That means feeling like you have to do it even when you don't really want to. Maybe you find yourself doing it out of boredom, frustration, or habit, not out of true desire. If you notice it becoming a go-to escape every single time you feel anxious or lonely, it might be time to pause and ask yourself, am I using this to avoid something else? Then there's isolation. If you're withdrawing from social events, skipping meals, or ignoring hobbies you used to enjoy just to stay in a private routine, that's a sign that something might be out of alignment. Masturbation should never replace connection. It should support it, not isolate you from it. Another common issue is physical irritation or injury, especially among older men. As skin becomes thinner and circulation changes, it's easier to experience irritation or soreness. If you're noticing discomfort, redness, or numbness, that's your body's way of saying, hey, let's slow down and adjust. There's nothing wrong with needing to be gentler or more mindful. Now let's talk about pornography, because for many men, especially those who've embraced the digital age, porn is part of the routine. Here's the deal. Watching adult material in moderation isn't necessarily harmful, but if it becomes extreme, excessive, or warps your expectations of intimacy, that's worth reflecting on. I've had patients tell me things like, I can't get aroused without it anymore. Real intimacy feels less exciting. I spend hours watching and then feel empty afterward. Those aren't just signs of overuse, they're signs of emotional disconnection. And again, no judgment. We all fall into habits. But if something meant to relieve stress ends up causing shame or dissatisfaction, it may be time to set healthier boundaries. There's also the issue of energy and motivation. Believe it or not, excessive solo activity can sometimes drain your energy, physically and mentally. If you're feeling more tired than usual, less motivated to get outside, move your body, or connect with others, it might be worth tracking your habits and seeing if they're contributing. And finally, one of the most important signs, emotional numbness or guilt after the fact. A little occasional guilt is common. We were raised in a different time with a lot of shame around this topic. But if you find yourself feeling anxious, ashamed, or emotionally disconnected after every time, that's not just old messaging. It may be a sign your deeper needs aren't being met. So what can you do if you recognize some of these signs? Start with self-compassion, not judgment. You're not bad or broken, you're human. Many men, especially in older age, use masturbation to cope with stress, grief, or loneliness without even realizing it. And the good news is, you can make shifts without cutting it out entirely. One tip I often give my patients is this: ask yourself what you really need in that moment. Is it touch? Is it connection? Is it comfort? Sometimes just becoming aware of the urge and why it's happening is enough to break the automatic pattern and create space for choice. You might also consider mixing up your routine. If you find yourself turning to masturbation out of boredom, try going for a walk first, call a friend, put on music. Give yourself other options to meet your emotional needs in addition to physical ones. And for those who feel it's gotten out of control, don't be afraid to talk to someone. That could be your primary care doctor, a therapist, or even a support group. You'd be amazed how many men your age are quietly struggling with the same thing, just waiting for permission to speak. Masturbation isn't the problem, but when it becomes a substitute for something your heart is really craving, companionship, purpose, affection, that's when it starts to hurt more than help. We've covered the risks, but don't worry, I'm not going to leave you there. In the next section, we'll focus on how to maintain a healthy, balanced relationship with your sexuality as you age, and how to turn what might feel like a taboo subject into a tool for healing confidence and even joy. Stick with me because this is where things get hopeful. We've talked about the changes your body goes through, the benefits of masturbation, and even the warning signs when it's too much. Now let's talk about something even more important: how to create a healthy, respectful, balanced relationship with your sexuality as you age. Because here's the truth. I wish every senior man could hear clearly: your sexuality doesn't expire, it evolves. It becomes less about performance and more about presence. Less about urgency, more about connection, whether that's with yourself or a partner. So, how do we maintain that balance? Let's start with a simple shift in mindset. You are allowed to feel desire, and you are allowed to explore it without guilt. That permission, whether it's granted by a doctor, a loved one, or yourself, is the first and most important step. A healthy relationship with your sexuality begins with accepting your body as it is now, not how it used to be. It's easy to fall into the trap of comparing yourself to your 30-year-old self. But the goal isn't to go back. It's to move forward with wisdom, gentleness, and gratitude. If your body takes more time now, that's okay. If things don't always work the way they used to, that's okay too. As one of my patients, Jim, age 68, once told me I stopped treating it like a race and started treating it like a walk in the garden. That changed everything. So what are some practical things you can do to support this healthy shift? 1. Be intentional. If you find yourself acting out of habit or boredom, pause. Ask yourself how you're feeling first. Are you lonely, anxious, tired, hungry? Sometimes what we're really craving isn't release, it's care. You might still choose to engage in self-touch, and that's perfectly fine, but do it consciously, not out of compulsion. 2. Change the environment. Create a space that feels safe, clean, and comforting. Light a candle. Play soft music. This may sound odd, but when we treat solo intimacy with care rather than something rushed or hidden, we send our body and mind a message. This is a part of life that deserves respect. 3. Incorporate the senses. Touch, scent, sound, breath. These are powerful tools for grounding yourself in the moment. Slowing down and breathing deeply can increase circulation and sensation, especially in older age. Don't rush. Allow the experience to unfold. 4. Focus on the whole body. This is key. As we age, arousal is often more responsive to full body stimulation than just one area. Gentle touch on your chest, thighs, neck, even your scalp, can awaken nerve pathways that have long been underused. 5. Stay physically active. I cannot stress this enough. Your overall circulation flexibility and pelvic health directly affect sexual function. Simple activities like walking, stretching, or yoga can do wonders for improving sensitivity and stamina. Not to mention your mood, which also plays a big role. 6. Keep the conversation open. If you're in a relationship, talk to your partner openly and without shame. You may find that they're going through similar changes and quietly wondering the same things. Intimacy doesn't have to disappear, it just may take on a new form. Hand-holding, cuddling, or even lying in silence together can be deeply connecting. 7. Set gentle boundaries. If you felt that masturbation has started to take over too much of your time or energy, set soft boundaries for yourself. For example, only at night, not in the morning, or after a walk or a phone call with a friend. Make it a part of a broader, well-rounded routine, not the center of your emotional regulation. And finally, don't be afraid to ask for help. Whether it's with medications, emotional support, or navigating grief or loneliness, there's no shame in asking for guidance. Sexuality in older adulthood is deeply connected to mental health. Talking to a counselor or doctor isn't a sign of weakness, it's a sign of strength. So, what does a healthy relationship with your sexuality look like at age 65, 75, or even 85? It looks like self-acceptance. It looks like giving yourself grace. It looks like honoring your needs, your rhythms, your story. You've lived a full life. You've earned the right to know your body without shame. You deserve connection, pleasure, and peace in this part of life, just as you always have. And if you've made mistakes, felt guilt, or carried old baggage about this topic, let this be the moment you begin to let that go. Because the next and final part of our conversation is about just that, what men in their later years say they wish they had known sooner, and how you can learn from their wisdom now. Stick around, you'll want to hear this. Now here's where things get really meaningful. Over my 30-plus years of working with seniors, I've had countless heart-to-heart conversations with older men, some in their 60s, some in their 90s, about what they've learned and what they wish they had known sooner about their body's intimacy and self-respect. And let me tell you, some of their reflections are powerful. So I want to share just a few of these life lessons with you because there's deep wisdom in them, wisdom that might help you live the next chapter of your life with more peace, clarity, and even joy. Let's start with one I've heard over and over again. I wish I had stopped feeling ashamed of it sooner. This one comes up a lot. Many older men grew up in a time when even the word masturbation was whispered behind closed doors. There was guilt. There was fear. Some were even told it would make them sick or immoral. But decades later, they see the truth. It was just a natural part of being human. And all that shame did was keep them from understanding themselves better. One man in his 80s, a retired Navy veteran named Richard, once told me, "I spent so many years feeling like I was doing something wrong. Looking back, I wish I had just given myself permission to be human. I would have saved myself a lot of anxiety." And that brings me to the next big one. I wish I had focused more on connection, not performance. As we age, the idea of performances, staying hard, lasting longer, doing everything right can feel overwhelming. But so many older men say they wish they had realized sooner that intimacy is about connection, not perfection. A gentleman named Clarence, who had been married for 52 years, put it this way: "If I could go back, I'd tell my younger self, stop worrying about being impressive. Just be present. That's what your partner remembers, the way you made them feel safe, seen, and loved." And what about men who lost their partners? Surprisingly, I've had more than a few widowers tell me, "I wish I had stayed in touch with my sexuality even after losing my spouse." Grief can silence that part of you. It can make you feel like pleasure is no longer allowed, or that moving on in any way dishonors the one you loved. But again and again, I hear stories of men who eventually found healing in remembering that they were still alive, still deserving of tenderness, even if it looked different than before. Harold, whom I mentioned earlier, said, "For a long time, I avoided anything that reminded me of intimacy. Then one night, I just held my own hand and cried. I realized I wasn't betraying her, I was taking care of the man she loved. Me." Now here's another one. This might surprise you. "I wish I had taken better care of my body, not just for sex, but for self-respect. Physical health is tied to sexual well-being more than most men realize. Men who stayed active, stretched out well, and managed their stress often kept enjoying intimacy solo or partnered well into their later years." One man in his 70s told me, "I used to think walking every day and eating more greens was about cholesterol. Turns out it helped everything: circulation, confidence, even bedroom stuff." And finally, here's one of my favorite lessons, and it comes up in nearly every conversation with wise older men. I wish I had talked about it more, with my friends, my doctor, my partner. There's a silence around sexuality in older age, and that silence can lead to misunderstanding, loneliness, and even fear. But every time these men finally opened up, even just a little, they felt relief, like a weight had been lifted. They realized they weren't alone. So what's the message here? Whether you're 60, 75, or 90, there's still time to learn, still time to grow, still time to connect with yourself and others. You don't need to be ashamed. You don't need to hide. You just need to be open and kind to yourself. So if you've struggled with guilt, or you felt like this part of life was over for you, let this be your turning point. Let the wisdom of these men remind you that it's never too late to reclaim your relationship with your body and your sexuality. Not to perform, not to impress, but to feel more at peace, confident, and connected than you have in years. In just a moment, we'll wrap this up with a final word and invitation. But first, take a breath. You made it through a conversation that most people avoid their entire lives, and that in itself is something to be proud of. So, here's the takeaway, my friend. You are never too old to understand your body, embrace your sexuality, and care for yourself with dignity. If this helped you, drop a 1 in the comments, and share this with a buddy who might need to hear it too. Stay kind to yourself. You deserve it.